No other species in American history has been at the center of human conflict and compromise as much as the gray wolf. This documentary explores this theme as related to wolf recovery and protection during the 1980s and 90s. The focus is on the Yellowstone and central Idaho region, and the complex story leading to the 1995 reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park. Once abundant across North America, the 1800s began the destruction of the gray wolves as European settlers decreased their habitat, but also killed wolves by the thousands. Even the conservation movement, which led to the establishment of Yellowstone National Park in 1872, did not bring protection to the wolves. Rangers were charged with taking part in federally established predator eradication programs. The last known wolves within park boundaries were killed in 1926. Over the next half-century, the absence of this great predator in the Yellowstone region began to be questioned. Concerns about potential harm to nature caused by humans grew, and calls were made for ecological research and wildlife management plans within national parks. In 1963, the Leopold Report was released, which stated that the purpose of the national parks is to preserve, and if necessary, recreate, which referenced not only the protection of land, but also animals. This report helped initiate a series of ecologically focused legislation throughout the 1960s and 70s. The gray wolf was listed as an endangered species in 1974, which meant that its recovery was federally mandated under the Endangered Species Act. Yet the 1980s and 90s brought conflicting views about wolf recovery and management, making progress slow and no side entirely happy. No wolves, no way was a popular sentiment in the livestock industry. The Montana Stock Grower Association promoted that reintroducing wolves would lead to a substantial loss of cattle at ranches near the park. Citizens found supporters among government officials. On the other side, conservationists and other government officials favored using the protections of the Endangered Species Act to allow natural reintroduction to occur, which was happening in other geographical locations. Jack Hubble is a documentarian and a park guide in Yellowstone. He grew up in Wyoming and shares what he remembers about the conflict.
Well, there was a lot of controversy within my family, especially because I was thinking the wolves, would be great to come back, and I was coming from a family who had for generations or for decades been really anti-wolf and wanting to get rid of them for their own reason because they affected their livelihood as far as they would feed on the cattle and the sheep, and so they had nothing really good to say about wolves.
Various legislation was proposed, and plans for wolf recovery and management were recommended throughout the 1980s, yet agreement was not reached. An important point of conflict was with regard to who was charged with making plans. Members across state and federal government, the scientific community, conservationists, and livestock producers all wanted to be involved with decisions such as where it would occur, who was responsible for making decisions, and how to balance the recovery of the gray wolf with human interests. Among the various recommendations was an idea of artificial reintroduction of the gray wolves into Yellowstone National Park, given its isolation from established wolf populations. However, legislative deadlock continued, with multiple conflicts and no compromise. In 1991, movement forward began again through congressional funding of a study on the environmental impact of gray wolf reintroduction into the Yellowstone region. Interest groups jockeyed for representation on committees charged with completing the report. The draft report received more public comments than any other federal proposal under consideration at that time. The final report, known as the Environmental Impact Statement, was released in 1994. The report provided details suggesting substantial compromise. Jack Hubble describes compromise for livestock producers.
The wolves, even before they had hunting season, if the wolves were preying on their livestock, they could go ahead and shoot the wolves and eliminate them. So they basically said, "Let us try this. If it basically causes more problems than we think. That the government said this, or the Park Service said this, but causes more problems than we think it's going to, then you have the option to go in and hunt them and eliminate them. The advantage that they had was also they give it to the states to be able to regulate it.
Perhaps the most important compromise in the environmental impact statement was wolf recovery that included artificial reintroduction. This meant that wolves would be designated as a non-essential experimental population and would not fall under the protections provided by the Endangered Species Act. However, this non-essential experimental designation was considered an important compromise, providing federal involvement in recovery efforts. Bob Barbee, who served as the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park from 1983 to 1994, reflected on the significance of this compromise. In 2005, he wrote that the notion of restoring wolves to Yellowstone had been around a long time before I got there, but never seriously pursued. How it was to be accomplished was bitterly disputed. Yellowstone's resource chief, John Varley, and I felt the only way we could get our nose under the tent was by using experimental population designation. We felt that it was necessary politically, and according to wolf experts, it would ensure a viable population of wolves and allow more flexibility in their management. Public interest to the issue continued, and it even caught the attention of national media.
Hearing a lot about next year is the wolf in the West. That's the reintroduction of wolves into Yellowstone National Park.
Federal reintroduction of the first wolves into Yellowstone National Park occurred on January of 1995. Pairs were relocated from Canada because they offered the closest match to the original gray wolves that lived in the Yellowstone region. Pairs were brought to pens within the park to acclimate, and then were released with the intent to mate and establish packs. Doug Smith was the head wildlife biologist, and later became the overall project leader, assigned to wolf recovery. Doug's job is wolf management, which means a lot of study of wolf behavior and their impact on other animals and plants. Overall, the artificial reintroduction has been deemed successful, as packs have established and evolved. And 2 decades later, Doug shares the larger impact of wolf recovery in Yellowstone.
Having a lot of different kinds of things at moderate numbers is better than having a lot of any one thing. And prior to wolf recovery, we had a lot of elk, we had a lot of coyotes, and we had very little things like willow and aspen and songbirds and beavers. And so the entry of wolves and other carnivores, because bears have increased and cougars have come back too. So now we're a carnivore-rich system, and we've restored that top layer of the system. So really the simplest way to look at it is all the parts of the system now are in place, and they're interacting differently. And I hesitate to use a value judgment-laden word, but it's healthier this way than we had certain parts of the system before that were absent. So all those things functioning together has made nature look like it used to.
The 1995 reintroduction of the gray wolf into Yellowstone has brought a general acknowledgement of the positive impact that wolves have had on the overall ecosystem. In addition, there has been increased public fascination with wolves, simulating tourism as wolf watchers try to catch a glimpse of this great predator. However, heated debates continue around some of the same questions about who was responsible for the decisions and how to balance human interests. Even today, gray wolves continue to evoke a continuum from love to hatred, serving to provide a complicated story of human conflict and compromise regarding both the gray wolf history and the future of environmental conservation.